Clara thought the hardest part of her night would be balancing a tray of champagne while wearing 4-inch heels. She was wrong. With a resignation letter hidden in her apron, she planned to slip away from the city's most dangerous underground club, vanishing before anyone noticed. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated exactly how much the boss, Adrian Sterling, saw. When she tried to leave his office, the heavy oak door didn't just close, it locked. The room went silent, and Adrian whispered a single sentence that froze the blood in her veins. She wasn't just a waitress to him. She was the target he'd been waiting for. And outside that door, a past she thought she had buried was waiting with a loaded gun. The air inside the velvet room always smelled of expensive cigars, old leather, and fear. It was a subtle cocktail, one that Clara had learned to navigate over the last 6 months. She adjusted the black satin of her uniform, forcing a smile as she wove through the crowded VIP section. To the patrons, senators, oil tycoons, and men whose wealth came from darker sources, Clara was invisible. She was just a pair of hands delivering 50-year-old scotch and crystal tumblers. That was exactly how she liked it. Invisibility was the only armor she had. But tonight, the armor felt thin. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that hadn't slowed since she clocked in at 7 p.m. In her pocket, folded into a tight square, was a letter. It was 2 sentences long. I resign. Effective immediately. Keep the final check. She didn't need the money anymore. She needed to run. Just 20 minutes ago, while clearing a table near the back exit, she had seen him, a man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his jawline. He was laughing with a group of Russians. But Clara knew that face. She had seen it in a grainy police file 3 years ago in Chicago, right before she changed her name, dyed her blonde hair chestnut brown, and fled across the country. The Scar. That's what the news had called him. The cleaner for the Midwest syndicates. If he was here, in New York, sitting in Adrian Sterling's club, it meant one of 2 things. It was a coincidence, or he had found her. Clara wasn't willing to bet her life on a coincidence. "More ice, sweetheart," a heavy-set man grunted, snapping his fingers near her face. Clara nodded, her movements mechanical. "Right away, sir." She moved toward the bar, her eyes darting to the private staircase that led to the mezzanine. That was where the office was. That was where Adrian Sterling sat, watching his kingdom like a hawk perched on a cliff. Adrian. Just thinking his name made her stomach twist, though not entirely from fear. He was a man carved from ice and granite, tall, with dark hair that fell slightly over eyes the color of storm clouds. He spoke rarely, but when he did, the entire club seemed to lean in to listen. He terrified everyone. The staff walked on eggshells around him. The patrons respected him with a reverence reserved for kings or killers. Clara had tried to avoid him. She kept her head down, did her work, and never made eye contact. But lately she had felt a weight on her, a gaze burning into the back of her neck. Every time she looked up, Adrian was there, on the balcony at the bar, watching her. Tonight, she couldn't worry about his gaze. She had to give the resignation to the floor manager, grab her coat, and disappear. But the floor manager, a weaselly man named Greg, was missing. Damn it, Clara thought, dumping ice into a bucket. I can't wait. She looked at the staircase again. If she left without resigning properly, Adrian would send people to find her. He was possessive of his staff. He demanded loyalty. If she just ghosted, it would draw attention. The very thing she was trying to avoid. She had to do this formally. She had to look him in the eye, lie about a sick relative, and walk out. She took a deep breath, smoothing her apron. Just do it. Walk in, hand the paper, walk out. 5 minutes. Clara ascended the stairs. The noise of the club, the thumping bass, the clinking glass, faded into a dull roar as she reached the heavy oak double doors of the executive suite. There were usually guards here, 2 massive men named Rico and Thorne. Tonight, the hallway was empty. A shiver of unease crawled up her spine. It was too quiet. She raised her hand to knock, but the door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, she could see the silhouette of a man standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the chaotic street below. She knocked softly. "Mr. Sterling?" The figure didn't flinch. "Enter." His voice was a low baritone, smooth but carrying an edge of command that made her legs feel heavy. Clara pushed the door open and stepped onto the plush Persian rug. The office was dimly lit, illuminated only by the amber glow of a desk lamp and the city lights bleeding in from outside. Adrian turned slowly. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, the jacket unbuttoned, his tie loosened slightly. In his hand, he held a glass of bourbon, untouched. "Clara," he said. He didn't ask who it was. He knew. "To what do I owe the pleasure? You're supposed to be on the floor." I know, sir," Clara stammered. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled note. Her fingers felt numb. "I need to talk to you. Briefly." Adrian took a sip of his drink, his grey eyes locking onto hers. He didn't blink. "You look pale. Are you ill?" "No," she lied. I have a family emergency. My mother. She's sick. In Ohio." Adrian tilted his head slightly, a shark sensing blood in the water. "Ohio? I didn't know you had family in Ohio. Your employment file says you have no living relatives." Clara froze. She had forgotten the lie she put on her application. "It's a distant aunt." She raised me. "Look, Mr. Sterling, I have to go. Tonight. Right now." She stepped forward and placed the note on his mahogany desk. It looked pathetic there, a scrap of paper against the expanse of his power. "I'm resigning," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "I'm sorry for the short notice, but I can't stay." Adrian looked at the paper, then back at her. He didn't pick it up. He didn't look angry. He looked amused? No, not amused. Intense. Predatory. "You can't stay," he repeated, savouring the words. "No, sir. And you think you can just walk out of the Velvet Room at 11 p.m. on a Friday because you decided it's time to go? I'm a waitress, Mr. Sterling, not a soldier. People quit jobs every day." Adrian set his glass down on the desk with a sharp clink. "People quit jobs, Clara. They don't quit me." He began to walk around the desk. He moved with a lethal grace, like a panther circling a trapped deer. Clara instinctively took a step back, her hand reaching for the doorknob behind her. "I really have to go," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. She could practically feel the scar's presence downstairs. Every second she wasted here was a second the noose tightened. "Why the rush?" Adrian stopped 3 feet from her. He towered over her, his scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco filling her senses. "Is it the tips? The hours? Or is it the man sitting at table 4 with the scar on his face?" Clara's breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," she gasped, gripping the doorknob. "I just need to leave." "Open the door, then," Adrian said softly, crossing his arms. "Go ahead. Walk out." Clara turned the handle. It didn't budge. She twisted it harder, rattling the heavy wood. Locked. It had been open when she walked in, and she hadn't heard a click. It was an electronic lock, controlled from his desk. "Mr. Sterling, let me out," she said, her voice rising an octave. "No, this is illegal. You can't keep me here." "I can do whatever I want, Clara. I own the building. I own the block. And right now, unfortunately for you, I own the problem you brought into my house." Clara spun around, her back pressed against the locked door. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt her chest. The veneer of the shy waitress was gone. The survivor from Chicago was surfacing, desperate and cornered. "I didn't bring anything," she hissed. "I'm just a waitress. If you know who that man is downstairs, then you know I'm not safe here. And neither are you." Adrian laughed. It was a dark, dry sound, devoid of humor. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but the intensity in his gaze was terrifying. "You think a low-level hitman from the Midwest threatens me?" Adrian asked, his voice low. "You think I'm afraid of the scar?" "He killed 3 people in a diner in broad daylight," Clara snapped. "He's a psychopath." "He's a tool," Adrian corrected. "A blunt instrument used by clumsy men. But that begs the question, Clara. Or should I call you Julianne?" Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She stopped breathing. Julianne. That was her real name. The name of the daughter of the district attorney who had tried to take down the Chicago mob 3 years ago. The district attorney who had died in a car accident. "Who are you?" she whispered, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "I'm the man who's been watching you for 6 months, Adrian said. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. For a second she flinched, expecting a strike, but he merely tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, his touch startlingly gentle against the violence of his words. "You thought you were clever," he continued, "dyeing your hair, wearing contacts, working in a place where the noise drowns out the thoughts. But you made a mistake coming to New York. My city isn't a hiding place, it's a chessboard, and you, Julianne, are the queen everyone is trying to capture." "If you know who I am, then you know he's here to kill me," Clara cried, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "Open the door. I have a car stashed 2 blocks away. I can disappear. I've done it before." Adrian slammed his hand against the doorframe next to her head. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Clara gasped, shrinking away. "You aren't listening," he growled, his face inches from hers. "Do you think you walked into this office to quit? You think you have a choice?" He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear, sending a shock wave of electricity down her spine. "You don't get to run, Clara, because the moment you walk out that door alone, you're a dead woman." He pulled back to look at her, his expression hard as stone. That man downstairs. He didn't just wander in for a drink. He's been tracking your credit card trail for weeks. He has 3 men covering the back exit and 2 at the front. Your stashed car is already being watched. If I unlock this door and let you leave, you won't make it to the street corner. Clara's legs gave out. She slid down the doorframe, crouching on the floor, burying her face in her hands. It was over. 3 years of running, sleeping with one eye open, living in cheap motels and working double shifts, all for nothing. They had found her. "Then I'm dead anyway," she sobbed into her hands. "If they're here, I'm dead." "Stand up," Adrian commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. Clara looked up at him through her tears. "I said, stand up." Slowly, shakily, she rose to her feet. "You are not dead," Adrian said, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked back to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a heavy, matte black pistol and checked the chamber with a practiced, fluid motion. He slid the weapon into a holster beneath his jacket. "You are not dead, because you belong to me now." Clara blinked, confused. "What?" "I didn't hire you because you can balance a tray," Adrian said, checking his watch. "I hired you because I knew who your father was. I respected him. He was one of the few men in this country with a spine. When I heard his daughter was in the wind, I kept tabs. When you landed in New York, I gave you a job to keep you close, to keep an eye on you. You've been protecting me?" "Passively. Until tonight." Adrian walked over to a panel on the wall and pressed a button. A section of the bookshelf swung open, revealing a hidden elevator. "Now I have to do it actively." He extended a hand toward her. "Come with me." "Where?" Clara asked, looking at the dark opening of the hidden passage. "My penthouse. It's the only place in the city they can't touch." "And if I refuse?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "I wasn't asking for your permission, Clara. I'm telling you how you survived the night. The scar is downstairs, but he isn't the one calling the shots. He's working for the Ivanov family. And if the Ivanovs are moving on American soil, it means a war is starting." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper again. "You walked into my office to quit your job as a waitress. Consider it accepted. Your new job is staying alive, and you start immediately." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Gunfire, screams. The bass of the music cut out, replaced by the chaotic noise of a panic stampede. Clara jumped, grabbing Adrian's arm instinctively. "They're early," Adrian cursed. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He grabbed Clara's hand, his grip like iron. "No more talking. We move. Now." He pulled her towards the secret elevator, but before they could reach it, the heavy oak doors of the office shook. Someone was trying to kick them in. Boom! The wood splintered around the lock. "Adrian!" Clara screamed. Adrian shoved her behind him, drawing his gun. "Get in the elevator, Clara. Go up to the penthouse and lock it from the inside. I'm not leaving you. Go, he roared, shoving her towards the opening. The office doors burst open. 2 men in tactical gear stormed in. Adrian fired twice, double taps to the chest, dropping them instantly. But behind them, stepping over the bodies with a sick grin on his face, was the Scar. He held a submachine gun, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Clara. "Hello, Julianne," the Scar rasped. "Daddy sends his regards." Adrian stepped into the line of fire, shielding her completely. He didn't look back at her, but his voice was calm, deadly steady. "Close the elevator, Clara." "No." "If you don't close it, I'll be distracted trying to save you, and we'll both die. Close it." Clara slammed her hand on the button. The bookshelf began to slide shut. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was Adrian Volkov, standing alone in the center of the room, raising his gun against a wall of enemies, fighting a war she had started. The elevator ride was a silent, suffocating ascent. There were no buttons, only a sleek panel that hummed with a low vibration as Clara, Julianne, shot upward, leaving the chaos of the velvet room 80 floors below. When the doors finally slid open, she wasn't greeted by a hallway, but by a sprawling expanse of glass and steel. Adrian's penthouse was less of a home and more of a fortress in the sky. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, but the beauty of the view was lost on her. All she could think about was the man she had left behind in a room full of killers. "Adrian," she shouted, her voice echoing off the cold marble floors. Silence. She spun around, frantically searching for a button to send the elevator back down. There was nothing. A keypad on the wall glowed red. Locked. "Damn it!" She slammed her fist against the panel. "Let me down!" She paced the room, her waitress apron stained with a smear of blood. Not hers. It was from when she had grabbed Adrian's arm. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She felt like a trapped bird. She ran to the windows, looking down, but the street was just a blur of red and blue lights. Police cars. Ambulances. Had he survived? She spent what felt like hours, though it was likely only 20 minutes, curled up on a white leather sofa, her eyes glued to the elevator doors. She played out every worst-case scenario. She imagined the Scar walking through those doors. She imagined the police coming to arrest her. Then the elevator hummed. Clara scrambled to her feet, grabbing a heavy crystal decanter from a nearby bar cart. She held it like a club, her knuckles white. The doors slid open. Adrian Sterling stumbled out. He wasn't the composed, imperious king of the underworld anymore. His suit jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was soaked in crimson on the left side, shredded where a bullet had grazed him. He was breathing hard, sweat matting his dark hair to his forehead. "Adrian!" Clara dropped the decanter on the carpet and ran to him. He looked up, his eyes hazy with pain, but still sharp with adrenaline. "Put the glass down, Clara. It's expensive." He tried to smirk, but it turned into a grimace as he collapsed onto one knee. "You're shot," she gasped, falling to her knees beside him. She hovered her hands over the wound, terrified to touch it. "We need an ambulance. I'm calling 911. "No!" Adrian's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "No police, no hospitals. They're compromised. Half the precinct is on Ivanov's payroll. You're bleeding out. It's a graze. Through and through, just help me up." Clara gritted her teeth and wrapped her arm around his waist. He was heavy, dead weight leaning on her, but adrenaline gave her the strength to haul him toward the sofa. She eased him down, ruining the pristine white leather with streaks of red. "First aid," she demanded, her voice trembling but authoritative. "Where is it?" "Master bathroom, under the sink. The black kit." Clara ran. She found the kit. It wasn't a standard pharmacy box. It was a military-grade trauma pack. She rushed back, ripping open packages of gauze and antiseptic. "This is going to hurt," she warned, soaking a pad in alcohol. Adrian leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. "Do it!" She pressed the pad to his shoulder. Adrian hissed through his teeth, his entire body seizing up, his hand gripping the armrest so hard the leather creaked. Clara worked fast, cleaning the wound with hands that had steadied themselves out of necessity. She had spent 3 years looking over her shoulder. She knew how to handle fear. It was the blood that scared her. "Why did you do that?" she asked quietly as she began to wrap the bandage around his muscular shoulder. "You could have just let me leave. You didn't have to take a bullet for a waitress." Adrian opened his eyes. They were dark, unfathomable pools. "I told you, you aren't just a waitress. You're an investment." "Is that all I am? An asset?" Clara tied the bandage tight, making him wince. "You're the daughter of Arthur Vance," Adrian said, his voice raspy. "Your father was the only man who tried to keep the syndicates out of the unions. He saved my life once, 10 years ago. Before I was this," he gestured to the luxury around him. "He didn't know who I would become, but I owed him a debt. When he died, that debt passed to you." Clara sat back on her heels, her hands bloody. "So this whole time, me getting the job, the apartment I found that was suspiciously cheap, that was you?" "I own the building you live in," Adrian admitted. "I own the coffee shop you visit every morning. I made sure your fake ID passed inspection when it shouldn't have." Clara felt a surge of anger mix with her relief. "You stalked me." "I surveilled you," he corrected. "There's a difference. Stalking is obsession. Surveillance is protection. And considering Victor, the scar, was in my lobby tonight, I'd say I didn't do a good enough job." "Victor?" Clara whispered the name. "Is he dead?" "No." Adrian tried to sit up, groaning. "I killed his men. But Victor is like a cockroach. He slipped out the back when the police siren started. He'll be back. And he won't come alone next time." Adrian looked at her, his expression hardening. "Which is why we can't stay here." "But you said this place was a fortress." "It was, until I fired a gun inside my own club. Now the police will want to come up for a statement, and if the police come, the Ivanovs will know exactly where we are. We have to burn this location." He stood up, swaying slightly. "Pack a bag, Clara. We're leaving in 10 minutes." "Leaving? To where?" Adrian walked to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a safe. He punched in a code. "To the only place I have left that isn't on a digital map. And you're driving." The car was a beast, a matte black Aston Martin, parked in a private basement garage that Clara hadn't even known existed. She sat in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the leather wheel so tight her knuckles were white. Adrian was in the passenger seat, changing his bloody shirt for a fresh black t-shirt he had grabbed from a gym bag. "Take the service tunnel," Adrian instructed, checking the clip of his handgun. "It spills out onto 4th Avenue. Keep your head down." Clara gunned the engine. The car roared to life, a low growl that vibrated through her chest. She tore out of the garage, the tires squealing on the concrete. The city was a blur of neon and rain as they merged onto the highway. Clara checked the rearview mirror every 3 seconds, expecting to see black SUVs tailing them. "Stop checking," Adrian murmured, his eyes closed. "If they were behind us, we'd be dead already. Just drive. Head north, towards Vermont." "Vermont?" Clara asked. "That's 6 hours away." "Exactly. Far enough to buy us time. Close enough to drive in one night." The silence in the car was heavy. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Clara glanced at Adrian. He was pale, the loss of blood taking its toll. He looked less like a Mafia boss and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. "My father," Clara said suddenly, breaking the silence. "He didn't just die, Adrian. You know that, right?" "I know the Ivanovs rigged his brakes," Adrian said softly. "I know they made it look like an accident." "No," Clara shook her head, tears pricking her eyes again. "I mean, he knew it was coming. 2 days before the crash, he gave me something. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I was to take it and run. He said never to give it to the police." Adrian opened his eyes, turning his head slowly to look at her. "What did he give you, Clara?" "A key," she said, "and a sequence of numbers. I memorized the numbers. I still wear the key." She reached into her shirt and pulled out a silver chain. Dangling from it was a small, unassuming iron key. It looked like it belonged to an old safety deposit box, not a high-tech vault. Adrian stared at the key, his eyes widening. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely shocked. "Pull over," he commanded. "What? We're on the highway. Pull over, now!" Clara swerved onto the breakdown lane, gravel crunching under the tires. The car came to a halt. Adrian unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned over, examining the key without touching it. "Do you have any idea what this is?" he whispered. "No, I kept it. It was all I had left of him." Adrian let out a long, incredulous breath. He ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't just a key, Clara. This is the death warrant for the entire Ivanov syndicate. Your father was building a RICO case against them, but the evidence vanished when he died. Everyone thought he destroyed it to protect you." He looked at her, a new respect and fear in his gaze. "He didn't destroy it. He locked it away. And you're the walking key to a vault that contains decades of blackmail, murder, and money laundering records." So that's why they want me, Clara realized, a cold chill washing over her. It's not just revenge. They think I have the evidence. "They don't think you have it," Adrian corrected. "They think you know where it is. If they catch you, they won't just kill you, Clara. They will torture you until you give them a location you don't even know you have." He looked out the window into the dark, rainy night. "This changes the plan. We aren't just hiding anymore. We have to go on the offensive. If we can find that vault before they find us, we can end this war." "I don't know where the vault is," Clara cried. "He just gave me the key and the numbers. 721-84-12. Adrian froze. "Say that again." 721-84-12. "Why?" Adrian let out a dark, dry chuckle. "Your father was a clever man. Those aren't random numbers. 721. July 21st. The day the Velvet Room opened originally, 50 years ago. Before I owned it. When it was a speakeasy." "What does that mean?" "It means," Adrian said, looking at her with intensity, "that the vault isn't in a bank. It's in my club. It's been under my feet the entire time." "We have to go back?" Clara asked, horrified. "No, not yet. The place is swarming with cops and Ivanov spies. We need to disappear, regroup, and plan a way to break into my own building." He reached over and put his hand on hers, covering her trembling fingers on the gearshift. "Drive, Clara, drive fast." The safe house was nestled deep in the green mountains of Vermont, miles away from the nearest paved road. It wasn't a rustic cabin. It was a modern, architectural marvel of concrete and glass, cantilevered over a rushing river. It looked like a villain's lair, cold and beautiful. They arrived just as the sun was beginning to bleed grey light over the horizon. The rain had turned to a light snow. Adrian was in bad shape. The drive had exhausted him, and his wound was bleeding through the bandages again. Clara had to help him out of the car, his arm draped heavily over her shoulders. "Code 9921, Adrian mumbled as they reached the heavy steel front door. Clara punched it in. The door hissed open. The air inside was stale and freezing. "Heating, automatic," Adrian slurred, stumbling toward a massive grey couch in the center of the living room. He collapsed onto it, his face grey. "Adrian," Clara rushed to him, checking his forehead. He was burning up. "You have a fever. The wound might be infected." "I'm fine," he muttered, trying to push her away, but his strength was gone. "Just lock the door. Check the perimeter sensors." "I locked it," Clara said softly. "You need to rest. I'm going to find some antibiotics and water." For the next 6 hours, Clara wasn't a waitress or a fugitive. She was a nurse. She found a well-stocked medical cabinet in the bathroom. She forced Adrian to take antibiotics and painkillers, stripped off his bloody shirt, and cleaned the wound again. When he finally fell into a restless sleep, Clara wandered the house. It was devoid of personality. No pictures, no books, just expensive furniture and silence. It made her sad. It was the house of a man who expected to leave nothing behind. She found a kitchen stocked with canned goods and dry pasta. She made a simple soup, the smell of broth filling the sterile space. When she returned to the living room, Adrian was awake. He was sitting up, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window at the snowy forest. He had a gun resting on his lap. "You should be sleeping," Clara said, setting the bowl of soup on the coffee table. "I don't sleep well," he replied, his voice clearer but still rough. He looked at her, his eyes tracking her movement. "You have good hands. Steady." "I had to learn," Clara said, sitting on the opposite end of the couch. When you live out of a suitcase, you learn to fix things yourself. Tell me about it, Adrian said. The last 3 years. Why? Because I know everything about Julianne Vance, the lawyer's daughter. I know nothing about Clara, the waitress. So she told him. She told him about the nights spent sleeping in her car in Iowa, about the diner jobs in Nebraska, where she was fired for refusing to flirt with the owner, about the constant gnawing fear that every person who looked at her too long was an assassin. Adrian listened, eating the soup slowly. When she finished, the room fell silent again, but the tension had shifted. It wasn't the fearful tension of the office. It was something else, a shared understanding between the two people who had been hunted. You're stronger than your father, Adrian said quietly. He was a good man, but he believed in the law. You believe in survival. He reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek. Clara leaned into the touch instinctively. It was the first time in 3 years she had allowed herself to feel safe. We're going to fix this, Adrian promised. I'm going to get that evidence, and I'm going to bury Victor and the Ivanovs so deep the devil won't find them. Clara looked at him, feeling a strange pull in her chest. And then what? What happens to me? Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip. Then, you can decide if you still want to resign. The moment was electric. Clara's breath hitched. She leaned in, just an inch. Beep! A sharp, high-pitched electronic chirp cut through the silence. Adrian pulled back instantly, his eyes snapping to a panel on the wall. The digital display, which had been green, was now flashing a slow, rhythmic yellow. What is that? Clara asked, fear returning instantly. Perimeter breach, Adrian said, his voice ice-cold. He grabbed the gun from his lap and stood up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. Someone just crossed the outer sensor line, 2 miles out. How? Clara stood up, backing away. Nobody followed us. I checked. They didn't follow the car, Adrian said, moving to the window and scanning the tree line. They tracked a signal. I don't have a phone. I threw it away. Adrian turned to her, his eyes scanning her up and down. The key, he said. Give me the key. Clara fumbled for the chain around her neck and handed it to him. Adrian held the iron key up to the light. He grabbed a heavier metal candlestick from the table and smashed the handle of the key. It cracked open. Inside the hollow iron stem was a tiny, microscopic chip. A passive RFID, Adrian cursed, throwing the pieces onto the floor. Your father didn't just hide the evidence. He made sure that if you ever moved the key, someone would know. Who? The police, Adrian said. But like I said, the police are compromised. Crack. The glass window next to Adrian's head shattered. Adrian tackled Clara onto the couch as a hail of bullets tore through the living room, shredding the expensive furniture and the silence of the woods. Get down, Adrian roared, returning fire blindly through the broken window. They're here. The beautiful glass house had become a cage of shrapnel. Bullets shredded the pristine walls, turning the view of the tranquil forest into a kaleidoscope of fracturing light and terror. Stay down, Adrian roared, firing 3 shots blindly through the window frame. He ducked back as a return volley decimated the couch where Clara had been sitting seconds ago. Clara crawled across the floor, her elbows scraping against the debris. We can't stay here. They'll flank us. The front door is the only exit, Adrian shouted over the deafening noise of automatic gunfire. He was reloading, his movement slightly slower than usual. The fresh bandage on his shoulder was already soaked through with bright red blood. He was running on adrenaline and willpower, but both were finite resources. No, it's not, Clara yelled. She pointed toward the kitchen island. The floor, the maintenance hatch for the plumbing. I saw it when I was looking for the pasta. Adrian looked at her, then at the kitchen. That drops into the crawl space under the cantilever. It's a 20-foot drop to the riverbank. Better than a bullet to the head. Another window shattered, this one in the kitchen. A canister clattered onto the floor, spinning and hissing. Gas, Adrian barked. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Clara's hand and lunged towards the kitchen. Go, now! He kicked the rug aside, revealing the outline of the hatch. He yanked the handle up. Below them was darkness and the roar of the river. Jump! Clara dropped into the void. She landed hard on frozen earth, rolling to absorb the impact. The air was biting cold, smelling of snow and damp soil. A second later, Adrian landed beside her, groaning as his injured shoulder took the jolt. Above them, the house was filling with tear gas. Through the slats of the cantilever, they could hear heavy boots crunching on glass. The hit squad had breached the front door. "They'll check the perimeter," Adrian whispered, pulling her up. "We have to cross the river. The water will hide our tracks." "The river?" Clara looked at the black, rushing water. It was halfway frozen, jagged sheets of ice clinging to the banks. "We'll freeze to death. If we stay on this side, we die. Move!" They slid down the muddy bank. Adrian went first, wading into the icy current. Clara followed. The cold was a physical blow, punching the air from her lungs. The water rose to her waist, numbing her legs instantly. They scrambled over slick rocks, slipping and fighting the current, using the noise of the rushing water to mask their movement. They reached the other side, shivering violently. Clara's teeth chattered so hard her jaw ached. Adrian wasn't looking good. His skin was the color of ash. "Keep moving," he stammered. "Logging road. 1/2 mile east." They ran through the dense tree line, the snow crunching under their sodden boots. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot. Behind them, flashlights swept the riverbank they had just left. Shouts echoed in the valley. They had bought themselves minutes, no more. They found the logging road, little more than a dirt track cut through the pines. Parked near a stack of timber was an old, rusted pickup truck, probably used by a foreman or a night watchman. Adrian tried the door. Locked. "Let me," Clara said, pushing him aside gently. She pulled a hairpin from her messy bun. Her hands were shaking from the cold, but her muscle memory from a misspent youth in Chicago kicked in. She jimmied the lock. It clicked. She opened the door and scrambled in, reaching under the steering column. "Hot wire?" Adrian asked, leaning against the passenger door, his breathing shallow. "Old Ford," Clara muttered, stripping 2 wires with her teeth. "Easy." The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. Clara threw it into gear. "Get in!" Adrian slumped into the passenger seat. "Heater, max." As they tore down the dark mountain road, Clara kept glancing at Adrian. He was fading. The cold and the blood loss were shutting his body down. "Don't you dare die on me, Adrian Sterling," she commanded, gripping the wheel. "You promised to bury them. You don't break promises." Adrian turned his head, a faint ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I'm not dying, Clara. I'm just thinking. Thinking about what?" About how a waitress learned to hotwire a truck in under 30 seconds. "I told you," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'm not just a waitress." "No," Adrian murmured, his eyes closing. "You're the queen." New York City was a fortress of glass and steel, indifferent to the 2 fugitives speeding across the George Washington Bridge in a stolen, rusted pickup truck. It was 3 a.m. The city that never sleeps was in its darkest hour. Adrian had regained some consciousness after Clara forced him to drink sugary soda and eat a granola bar she found in the truck's glove box. The heater had thawed their limbs, but the danger was colder than the Vermont River. "We can't just walk in the front door of the Velvet Room," Clara said. "The police tape will be up. There will be a patrol car." "The police aren't the problem," Adrian said, checking his weapon. He had 2 magazines left. "Victor will have men inside. He knows the vault is there. He just doesn't know the code or the location. He's probably tearing the walls down looking for it." "So we're walking into a trap." "We're springing it," Adrian corrected. "Park in the alley on 42nd. There's a coal chute that leads to the old boiler room. It connects to the wine cellar." They ditched the truck and moved through the shadows of the alley. The city air smelled of exhaust and garbage, a stark contrast to the pine of Vermont. But to Clara, it smelled like a battlefield. The coal chute was tight. Clara went first, sliding down into the soot-choked darkness. Adrian followed, landing with a heavy thud that made him wince. They navigated the labyrinth of the basement, moving past silent boilers and stacks of crates. They reached the wine cellars. Clara paused, her heart hammering. Above them, through the floorboards, she could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate. "They're here," she mouthed. Adrian nodded. He signaled for her to stay behind him. They crept up the service stairs, emerging behind the bar in the main lounge. The club was a wreck. The fight from the night before, or was it 2 nights ago, had left tables overturned and glass shattered everywhere. But the destruction had continued. The walls had been smashed open with sledgehammers. The upholstery was ripped apart. Victor's men were looking for the vault. 2 guards stood near the main entrance, smoking. Adrian moved like a shadow. He came up behind the first one, striking him with the butt of his gun. Silent, efficient. The man crumpled. The second guard turned, but Adrian was already there, grabbing his throat and slamming him against the wall, choking him into unconsciousness before he could make a sound. Adrian looked back at Clara and pointed to the stairs leading to the office. The office. The place where this nightmare began. They moved up the stairs, avoiding the creaky steps Clara knew by heart from carrying heavy trays. The office doors were already broken, hanging off their hinges. Inside, the room was demolished. The bookshelves were torn down. The desk was overturned. Standing in the center of the ruin was Victor, the Scar. He was shouting at a subordinate who was drilling into the wall safe. "It's not in the wall, you idiot!" Victor screamed, backhanding the man. "The tracker died in Vermont, but they came back here. Why? Because the leverage is here." "Maybe they aren't coming back," the subordinate whimpered. "He'll come," Victor growled. "Sterling is arrogant. And the girl is stupid." "The girl," a voice said from the doorway, "is holding a gun." Victor spun around. Clara stood in the doorway, holding the pistol she had taken from the unconscious guard downstairs. Her hands were shaking, but the barrel was pointed straight at Victor's chest. "Julianne," Victor smiled, spreading his arms. The jagged scar on his face twisted hideously. "You look terrible, sweetheart." "Rough night?" "Get away from the desk," Clara ordered. "Or what? You'll shoot me? You've never fired a gun in your life." "I have." Adrian's voice came from the shadows behind Clara. He stepped into the light, his own gun raised. "And I don't miss." Victor laughed. "Sterling, you look like you've lost a few pints. Can you even hold that steady?" "Steady enough to put a bullet between your eyes." "You could," Victor agreed. "But then you'd never know who hired me." "You think I'm the top of the food chain?" "The Ivanovs are just the muscle. The man who wants those files. He's the one who signs your liquor license. He's the one who controls the NYPD. "I don't care who he is," Adrian said. "I'm going to bury him too." "Bold words," Victor snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the balcony, 3 more men emerged, weapons trained on Adrian and Clara. It was a standoff, 3 against 2, and Adrian was wounded. "Drop the guns," Victor commanded, "or the girl dies first." Adrian hesitated. He looked at Clara. "Do it, Adrian," Clara said softly. "Clara, trust me." Adrian slowly lowered his gun to the floor. Clara did the same. "Good," Victor grinned. "Now, Julianne, you're going to tell me where the vault is, or I'm going to start cutting pieces off your boyfriend here." Clara took a deep breath. She walked past Adrian, stepping into the center of the room. She looked Victor in the eye. "It's under the rug," she said. Victor raised an eyebrow. "The rug?" "My father. He liked puzzles. The numbers. 7218412. It's not a combination. It's coordinates within the room." She pointed to a specific spot on the Persian rug, right where the bloodstains from the previous night had dried. "There." Victor motioned to his men. "Check it." One of the men shoved the heavy desk aside and ripped up the rug. Beneath it, set flush into the floorboards, was a steel panel with a digital keypad. "Well, well," Victor murmured. He looked at Clara. "Open it." Clara knelt by the safe. She could feel the cold steel under her fingers. She punched in the code. 07218412. Beep, click. The hydraulic hiss of the safe opening echoed in the silent room. "Step away," Victor ordered, aiming his gun at her head. Clara stood up and backed away, moving until her back hit the front of the heavy mahogany desk. Victor stepped forward, greedy, his eyes locked on the open safe. He looked down into the dark compartment. "Empty?" Victor roared, looking up. "It's empty." "It's not empty," Clara said, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "Look closer. There's a false bottom." Victor leaned in further, squinting. That was the moment. Clara reached behind her blindly. Her hand found what she was looking for, the bottle of 50-year-old scotch Adrian had left on the desk the night she tried to resign. "Adrian, down!" she screamed. She grabbed the bottle and smashed it not at Victor, but at the exposed electrical socket on the wall, where the safe's wiring had been ripped out during the earlier search. The high-proof alcohol splashed over the sparking wires and onto the alcohol-soaked rug. Whoosh! A wall of blue and orange fire erupted instantly, separating Victor and his men from Adrian and Clara. Victor screamed as the flames caught his pant leg. He fired blindly through the fire. Move! Adrian grabbed Clara, tackling her behind the overturned heavy oak desk just as bullets chewed up the wood. You lit my office on fire, Adrian yelled, though he was grinning like a maniac. I created a distraction, Clara yelled back. Through the flames, they could see the shadows of the men retreating. The fire sprinkler system kicked in, a deluge of water raining down, turning the room into a misty, chaotic hellscape. Victor stumbled through the steam, his clothes singed, his face a mask of rage. He didn't care about the fire. He wanted blood. He lunged over the desk, tackling Adrian. The gun skittered away across the wet floor. Adrian and Victor grappled in the water and ash. Adrian was weaker, his wound reopening. Victor landed a heavy punch to Adrian's jaw, then another. He wrapped his hands around Adrian's throat, squeezing. Die, Victor spat. Just die. Clara scrambled for the gun. It was too far. She looked around. She saw the shattered remains of the Scotch bottle. She grabbed a jagged neck of glass. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She drove the glass into the side of Victor's neck. Victor gasped, his grip loosening. He looked at Clara, shock registering in his eyes. He slumped sideways, rolling off Adrian, gargling as he clutched his neck. Adrian coughed, gasping for air. He looked at the body of the man who had hunted them, then at Clara. Clara dropped the bloody glass, her hands shaking violently. It's over, she whispered. Adrian pulled himself up, wincing. He crawled over to the open floor safe. He reached in, not for a false bottom, but for a small, waterproof drive taped to the underside of the lid. He was looking in the hole, Adrian rasped, holding up the drive. He never looked at the lid. Sirens wailed outside. Real sirens. Dozens of them. The police, Clara said, panic rising. If they're compromised. Adrian stood up, swaying. He took Clara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He walked to the window, the drive clutched tight in his other hand. Let them come, Adrian said, watching the flashing lights illuminate the rain. We have the insurance, and for the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for. He looked at Clara, the waitress who had saved his life, the girl who had burned down his office, the woman who had killed his monster. You're fired, Clara, he said softly. What? She blinked, adrenaline crashing. You're fired, he repeated, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of smoke and rain. I can't date my employees. And just like that, Clara went from serving drinks to saving the boss, proving she was never just a waitress. She was a queen in the making. From the moment that office door locked to the final fiery showdown in the ruins of the Velvet Room, Adrian and Clara proved that in a world of crime and betrayal, trust is the most dangerous weapon of all. They started as enemies, trapped in a room, and ended as partners ready to take on the world. What did you think of that ending? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and you loved the chemistry between the Mafia boss and the waitress, please hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more intense Mafia romances like this one. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new dramas every week. I have a question for you. Do you think Clara should take over the business alongside Adrian? Or should they take the money and vanish into a normal life? Let me know your theory in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.